So far, all of the emperors we've looked at have been extraordinary. You don't get to become emperor without being extraordinary in some way, even if it's just that you are extraordinarily lucky. Our next subject, though, is both extraordinary and unique, being the only female emperor in Chinese history. Wu Zetian ruled during the Tang dynasty from 690 CE to 705 CE. From a teenage concubine, she rose to ultimate power through political acumen and manipulation. Her ascent to power and her subsequent reign were fraught with challenges, revealing the potential and constraints of female leadership in a patriarchal society, all of which Wu Zetian overcame in her own unique way. Wu Zetian was born in 624 CE during the Xu dynasty into a relatively modest family in Lizhou, located in modern-day Sichuan province. Her father, Wu Shiyi, worked in the timber business, and the family was relatively well off. Her mother was from the powerful Yang family, distant relatives of the imperial family of the Xu. Wu was encouraged by her parents to read books and pursue her education, which was unusual given that society at the time held to Confucian ideals that emphasized loyalty, family hierarchy, and the subordination of women. She learned about music, calligraphy, literature, history, politics, and other governmental affairs, and showed an aptitude for learning, earning her a reputation for intelligence and sharp wit. This education would set her apart in a world where women were largely relegated to domestic roles. At 14 years old, she was taken to be an imperial concubine of Emperor Taizong, and she became a type of secretary, which allowed her to continue her education. The imperial palace must have been a very different place to what she was used to. It housed elaborate courts, exquisite gardens, an array of servants, and presented both a new set of challenges and an opportunity. As we saw last time, the Emperor Taizong was known for his enlightened rule, but he was still a man of his time, enforcing a patriarchal structure within both the state and the family. Despite this, Wu's unusual education served her well. Through her intelligence and charm, she caught Taizong's attention, not easy to do amongst so many concubines. There's a story that Taizong had a new horse, which hadn't yet been broken in, and he asked Wu Zetian how she would handle it. She replied, first with an iron switch, then with an iron rod, and finally with a dagger to its throat, revealing a nice balance of pragmatism and psychopathy. Taizong was charmed. When Taizong died in 649 CE, Wu Zetian became a nun, which was the usual career path for concubines whose emperors had died and who had produced no sons. She was just 25, and as far as anyone was concerned, that was the effective end of her career. Well, for most concubines, that would have been the end of her career, but not for Wu, obviously. To understand why, we have to go back a few years. The lives of the Wu family, and Wu Zetian in particular, were closely intertwined with three emperors: Gaozu, his son, the Emperor Taizong, and Taizong's son, the Emperor Gaozong. During the final years of Emperor Yang of Xu, Li Yuan, soon to become the Emperor Gaozu, stayed in the Wu household many times and became close to the family. When Li Yuan became emperor, he rewarded the Wus by giving them grain, land, clothing, and wealth, by giving Wu Shiyi, Wu Zetian's father, a succession of senior ministerial posts. Wu Zetian was called to the palace at the age of about 14 in 637 BCE and became a kairen, a kind of mid-level concubine to Taizong, doing mostly secretarial work. Mostly. At this time, Taizong's son, the future Emperor Gaozong, was about 9 years old. Considering what was to happen later, it's reasonable to assume that Wu Zetian made a great impression on the young Gaozong. As I mentioned, Taizong died in 649 and Wu Zetian was packed off to a convent. This sounds bad, and it is, but it's not as bad as it could have been. Those of you paying attention will remember that Qin Shi Huang was buried with those of his concubines who had failed to give him sons. So by comparison, life in a convent was a pretty sweet deal. Wu Zetian stayed in the monastery for about 2 years until Gaozong came calling. Gaozong was still captivated by her beauty and her intellect, and only too happy to seek the company of the now available Wu. He brought her back to the palace as a concubine, the old romantic, and gave her a promotion to Zhao Yi, a level just below Gaozong's official concubine Xiao and the Empress Wang. As she navigated her new role, Wu began to consolidate her position. The depth of her political acumen and her ambition became increasingly evident as she began to act not only as a consort, but also as an advisor to the emperor. Gaozong was inexperienced and frequently incapacitated with a sickness that caused him spells of dizziness, and seems to have been happy to rely increasingly on Wu Zetian. At first, that is. By the 660s, Wu's influence had grown to the point that she had effectively displaced her rivals, more senior consorts who had initially occupied the higher ranks within the emperor's affections. One of the most notable moves in this path to power involved the contrived defamation of her chief rival, the Empress Wang. In 654, Wu gave birth to a daughter who died shortly after birth, with evidence, in very large inverted commas, suggesting that the child had been strangled. The evidence, such as it was, included allegations made by Wu that the Empress Wang committed the murder. Wu convinced Gaozong that Wang, motivated by jealousy of the fact that Wu had provided a child when she had been unable to, had murdered the baby. Was this the case? Honestly, who knows? There are stories that Wu killed the child herself as part of a plot to frame the empress, which fits in nicely with the prevailing view that Wu was power-hungry and would stop at nothing to get it. And it's certainly possible that Wang, motivated by jealousy, really did kill the baby. Of course, it's also equally possible that the child died of what we would now call sudden infant death syndrome. Remember, this is the 650s. Rooms very, very poorly ventilated, and combining this using coal as a fuel for heating in the palace could just as easily have led to carbon monoxide poisoning. Whatever the truth, the emperor believed Wu and was furious, wanting to depose Wang and replace her with Wu. But Wang was the empress, so he needed to be sure that he had the support of his government chancellors, which wasn't forthcoming, and so the empress stayed, for now. Meanwhile, possibly seeing which way the wind was blowing, a group of high-ranking officials began to form around Wu, providing her with further support. When, the following year, in the summer of 655, Wu accused Wang of witchcraft, their support was enough to tip the balance. This time, Gaozong deposed Wang and installed Wu as empress in her place. Later the same year, Gaozong started to have second thoughts and showed signs of considering Wang's release. So the new Empress Wu had her killed. There was to be no going back. On the political front, Wu began to influence appointments in government. She strategically placed allies in positions of power, ensuring a network of support across the empire. Her endorsement of capable officials showcased her astute judgment regarding governance. Perhaps because of her own upbringing, she recognized the importance of education and meritocracy and promoted individuals based on ability rather than their noble birth. In 660, Emperor Gaozong began to suffer from painful headaches and loss of vision, and began to have Empress Wu make rulings on daily petitions by officials. By 664, however, Wu had become so involved in the empire's governance that she was angering Gaozong with her controlling behavior. He consulted his chancellor, who suggested that he depose Wu. He had the chancellor draft an edict to do so, but Wu heard about what was going on and went to the emperor to plead her case. Gaozong couldn't bear to depose her and blamed the whole episode on his chancellor, and Wu had him executed. In late 683 CE, Gaozong died, and Wu became Empress Dowager and Regent. Gaozong's will stated that Li Jie, Wu's third son, should ascend immediately to the throne, but that Empress Wu should claim senior authority in the empire for herself. And so, in the second month of 684, Li Jie ascended to the imperial throne for 6 short weeks. The new emperor was married to a woman of the Wei family. Because Li Jie was as weak and incompetent as his father, the new empress sought to place herself in the same position of great authority that Empress Wu had enjoyed. It will come as no surprise to learn that Empress Wu was having none of that and deposed Li Jie, installing as emperor instead her youngest son, Li Dan. Li Dan was emperor in name only. Wu was the absolute ruler in both substance and appearance. She didn't follow the customary pretense of hiding behind a screen or a curtain and issuing whispered commands for her son to announce. No, her reign was fully recognized, there for all to see. Li Dan never moved into the imperial quarters or appeared at official functions and remained a virtual prisoner in the inner quarters. He held the title of emperor, but Wu firmly controlled the imperial court, and officials were not allowed to meet with him, nor was he allowed to rule on matters of state. It was to Wu Zetian that officials reported. Not surprisingly, she suspected many of those court officials of opposing her, so she had mailboxes installed outside imperial government buildings to encourage the people of the realm to report secretly on others. Wu personally read all the reports, and secret police officials began to carry out systematic false accusations, torture, and executions. In 690, 7 years after the death of her husband, Wu took the final step to become the empress regnant of the newly proclaimed Zhou dynasty and took the title Huangdi, despite the fact that the traditional Chinese order of succession did not allow a woman to ascend the throne. Wu was determined to quash any opposition, and the early years of her reign were characterized by her use of the secret police and on a system of spies, eliminating many of her real, potential, or perceived rivals through execution, suicide by command, demotion, or exile. She used informants to choose people to eliminate, a process that peaked in 697 with the wholesale demotion, exile, or killing of various aristocratic families and scholars, and prohibiting their sons from ever holding office. 697 also saw the death of Lai Zhenchen, one of her top enforcers. Lai is worth taking a quick look at, as it gives you a flavour of what life was like at the time and what Wu Zetian was like as a ruler. Lai was born in 651 and was described as vicious and unprincipled even as a youth. He came to favour with Wu by submitting secret reports to her, exposing alleged traitors. Wu made him deputy imperial censor, a role that gave him the authority to do pretty much whatever he wanted in the service of his emperor. It was an authority he exercised with relish. He recruited hundreds of thugs to submit false reports against enemies, actual and possible, of the emperor. He was so good at this that he literally wrote the book on the subject, the Manual of Entrapment, which was a guide on how to fabricate charges and extract confessions. And extract confessions he did, using some truly horrible torture methods. His investigation bureau was situated at Luojing Gate in Luoyang and became known as the Gate of Certain Death. 99% of people who went in never came out. Wu Zetian certainly knew all this. She twice shielded him from corruption charges, but he was useful to her. The atmosphere he created meant no official felt secure enough to organize opposition. Any wealthy family could be dispossessed at will to fill the state coffers, and the threat of arbitrary arrest and almost certain death stifled any possible dissent. It's estimated the Lai destroyed over 1,000 families until he reached a family he couldn't destroy: Wu's. In 697, overreaching himself, he accused the emperor's children of plotting against her. They appealed to Wu, who, realizing that Lai was now turning his sights on her family, the way he had hundreds of other families before them, decided that he was no longer useful and took immediate action. He was arrested and executed by decapitation. Contemporary reports say that the citizens of Liaoyang, long terrorized by Lai, descended on his body and ate it. Wu overhauled the censorate and disbanded the Investigations Bureau, replacing it with a structure that meant it was no longer possible for one single bureau to exercise such unchecked powers. As a woman from outside the Li family, the founders of the Tang dynasty, she needed an alternative power base. She found this in the imperial examination system. Reform of the imperial examinations featured prominently in her plan to create a new class of elite bureaucrats, derived from humbler origins like her own. Both the palace and the new military examinations, created under Wu Zetian, were based solely on merit, much as they had been before, but they now contained an assessment by Wu herself, allowing her to personally select the people she wanted and giving her a power base of military and governmental leaders loyal to her. It was around this time, at the age of 73, that Wu began relationships with two brothers in their late 20s, Zhang Yiji and Zhang Chongzong, who were ultimately to be her downfall. As Wu grew older, Zhang Yiji and Zhang Chongzong became increasingly powerful, and she increasingly relied on them to handle the affairs of state. This was secretly discussed and criticized by palace officials, including Wu's grandson and granddaughter. Somehow this discussion was leaked and was reported to Wu. She ordered them to kill themselves. In autumn 704, accusations of corruption began to be leveled against Yi Qi and Chang Zhong, as well as their brothers Zhang Changqi, Zhang Changyi, and Zhang Tongxiu, all of whom were employed at the palace in some way. Zhang Tongxiu and Zhang Changyi were demoted, but even though officials advocated that Zhang Yiji and Zhang Chongzong be removed as well, Wu Zetian did not do so, and charges of corruption continued despite Wu's intervention. In winter 704, Wu Zetian became seriously ill, and only the Zhang brothers were allowed to see her. This led to speculation that Zhang Yiji and Zhang Chongzong were plotting to take over the throne, and accusations of treason were added to the accusations of corruption. Although her condition improved, Wu still refused to allow anyone but the brothers to attend to her. By spring 705, Wu was seriously ill again. This time, Wu's chancellors and advisors acted directly. Convincing the army to be involved, on 20th of February 705, they killed Zhang Yiji and Zhang Chongzong and surrounded the hall where Wu was living. They forced her to yield the throne, and on 23rd of February, Li Xian took the throne, ending the Zhou dynasty after only 15 years and one emperor, restoring the Tang. Wu died in December of that year, 705, at the age of 81. In thousands of years of history, China's only female emperor. The transition from Wu as consort to her self-proclamation as emperor encapsulates the amazing transformation of her identity and ambition. Such aspirations are deeply rooted in the notion of power, illustrating how individuals often transcend societal expectations in its pursuit. As Wu declared herself emperor, she not only shattered gender conventions, but also challenged the deeply patriarchal structure that had prevailed for centuries. And while she could be vicious, she had numerous of her own family members executed, she was not a bad emperor, all things considered. Many of her policies were popular and helped gain support for her rule. She was fortunate in that she came to power during a time when the people were generally content, the administration was run well, and the economy was doing well. But as far as most people were concerned, Wu kept this going. It's one thing to inherit a good situation, it's quite another to maintain it, and maintain it she did. She was determined that farmers should continue to work their own land, so she used the equal field system and updated census figures to ensure fair land allocations and reallocated land where necessary. And she issued various edicts which helped satisfy the needs of the lower classes through various acts of relief. Her widening of recruitment to government service to include commoners, and her generous promotions and pay rises for the lower ranks. Wu Zetian's rise to power demonstrate a almost unique blend of intelligence, ambition, and strategic brilliance. Her journey from minor concubine to the emperor of China didn't happen by accident. It was the result of a series of calculated decisions, alliances, opportunism, and ruthless determination. Her story illustrates that remarkable women can and do shape history, often in ways that defy the limitations placed on them by societal norms, which at that time viewed women as inferior to men. Legal and cultural frameworks explicitly defined women's roles in relation to men, be it as daughters, wives, or mothers. Often records of the time didn't even bother to record the names of women. They simply weren't seen as important enough. As a female leader, Wu faced rampant misogyny and criticism, exacerbated by her assertion of power in a male-dominated hierarchy. Confucian ideology dictated that a woman could not hold such authority, so her reign was often legitimized through her relationships with male counterparts, particularly by framing her rule as a continuation of her husband's legacy. But through her own merit, Wu Zetian proved to be an exceptionally capable ruler, surrounding herself with competent officials, many of whom were scholars, and her reign is often marked by advancements in bureaucracy and administration. It's also notable for its focus on economic prosperity and stability. She implemented agricultural reforms, as I mentioned earlier, improved irrigation systems, and enhanced grain production, which yielded significant benefits for the empire. She promoted Buddhism, possibly because of an affair she was rumored to be conducting with a senior Buddhist monk at the time, but which she also used as a political tool to garner broader support among the populace. By framing her rule within a religious context, she was able to bolster her image as a benevolent leader, which was crucial to her acceptance in a patriarchal society. Her position was constantly under threat from male rivals who questioned her legitimacy and depicted her as manipulative and untrustworthy. Propaganda was employed against her, including art and literature that vilified her. Various historical texts, like the Old Book of Tang, detailed accusations of tyranny and moral corruption, portraying the image of a woman whose power was unnatural. Such depictions were not uncommon, as women in positions of authority have historically been subjected to scrutiny that male leaders often evade or held to a very different standard. Her relationship with the Zhang brothers, for instance, was viewed as a scandal at the time and by historians. But had Wu been a man and the Zhang's women, would it still have been such a scandal? Did she do anything in the pursuit of the throne that a man hadn't done previously or wouldn't do in the future? No. But as a woman, she faced criticism that men didn't. In recent times, historical re-evaluations have begun to reclaim her image, portraying her as the complex, multifaceted leader that she obviously was, rather than merely the tyrant she had been branded. Nevertheless, the image of a woman donning the imperial robes must have been a shock, challenging contemporary understandings of female power and authority. It's a reminder that history is often written not just by the victors, but also by those courageous enough to defy the odds and current convention. What Wu believed, rightly or wrongly, she had to do to retain power came with a price. The fear she instilled led to an oppressive climate in the court, fostering resentment and alienating potential allies. By 705, her power was precarious, and when she abdicated, the very forces she had fought against were galvanized, leading to a swift reversal of almost all her policies and a restoration of male hegemony. There would never again be a female emperor. Join me next time as we take the second of our intervals. We take a little break and look at the An Lushan Rebellion. Throughout its long history, China has undergone many rebellions and revolutions, but the An Lushan Rebellion remains one of the most devastating. Join me then.